Welcome to the Fairy Podcast with Winslow. And today it is an honor to have Jill Spruance, a fairy advisor here, who is from Basilwood Farms in the Central California foothills. And we're here to have a fairy conversation. This podcast is about fairy stories, anything about the fairies, and for anyone of any age who is curious about the fairies and loves the fairies. So Jill, so great to have you here. Thank you for joining me and the fairies. And tell us a little bit about Basilwood Farms first, because it does connect in with the fairies.
Okay, so we started the farm about 13 years ago, and it began as just a project to see how many things we could make ourselves, because my daughters had grown older and I wanted to do something with our property besides just have nothing. So I got some goats, and we began with dairy goats so that we could milk them and have our own milk to drink and yogurt and cheese and be able to provide that for our family. And then I also started a large vegetable garden at the same time. So we were growing a lot of our own food, and I had excess milk. So I started looking for other things I could do with it. And one of the things was soap. So I started making goat's milk soap, which at the time I didn't even know you could make goat's milk soap, and started making that and using it. And we felt such a difference in our skin that it became a product. So it became a business. But I think where the fairies got involved was when we started utilizing more things on the property and we got goats, because I don't know if you know this, but fairies really like milk a lot. Mm-hmm. And so when we had dairy goats, of course, they showed up.
Wow. Did you, before the farm, did you love the fairies? Were you intrigued by the fairies? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my whole life. Yeah. Oh. Fairies are magical. You know, they're like the things that you think of when you're underneath a willow tree, or you're reading a wonderful book, or you just want to let your imagination wander into happy places. There's fairies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The twinkle of magic and
yes,
realms.
Yes.
You've always loved them and felt connected. Mm-hmm. And then with the goats, it became even more of a presence in your life.
Yes. Yes. And then one Christmas, we came up with a soap called pixie dust. Mm-hmm. And the reason we made that soap, because a lot of people refer to fairies as pixies too. And so we named the soap pixie dust, and I had made it. And the next morning, you know what happened? There was sparkle all over the top of the soap. Mm-hmm. The fairies had come and left sparkles all over the soap. Mm-hmm. From that point on, all the other soaps that I have that have sparkles on them are from fairy dust.
Jill, that is amazing.
I know.
Oh, and I have actually, the reason we connected, Jill and I, is because I actually bought that pixie dust soap at one point, and it was so beautiful and it felt very special. Mm-hmm. Which makes sense, because it's a creation from you and the goats and the fairies. And
it's a collective effort.
It's a collective effort. Wow. So cool. So tell us a little bit more about the goats, the fairies, and you also mentioned you had a special dog.
Yes. So another thing about the fairies that live here is that they really like friendly dogs who are kind to children. And we had a dog named Toby, who was a very, very tall Doberman. And he hardly ever barked. He moved very slowly. And we have a lot of field trips with young children here. Well, people of all ages, but this particular field trip, we had young children. There was a little girl about 3 years old who was afraid of dogs. And her mom told us that she was afraid of dogs when she came. And I said, okay, well, I'll keep an eye out, make sure she's not frightened because Toby's very friendly. Well, Toby stood next to that little girl the entire time she was down by the chicken coop. He did not move a muscle and just stood perfectly still so she could pet him. And when it came time to leave, the fairies whispered in his ear and said, Toby, that little girl really loves you. And you know what happened? Toby wrapped his neck around that little girl's neck like he was giving her a hug. And she threw her arms around his neck and she said, I love you, Toby. And we just all kind of fell apart at that point. Her mother was just taken aback. So was I, because I just couldn't believe that happened. And I got to witness it because it was just such a sweetheart thing that he did. And I know that that's the magic of being around that type of event when you get to witness it and see magic happen. That was that day.
Wow. And it's
Yeah.
like real, it's like connecting in the fairy realms and feeling their kindness and their connection and their joy and all their positive qualities.
Yes.
And really feeling that ripple and reflect into the physical dimension. Right
Yeah.
into your eyes.
Yeah. It was really sweet. I'm
Wow.
glad I got here for that.
Yeah,
Toby was a special guy.
special guy. And so special that the fairies are so connected in with the animals. And I always love and tell people whether, because some people believe in the fairies, some people are not so sure. And I love that the fairies create this space where it's like, even if we believe or don't believe, but it's a space where children can, and adults and all of us can feel safe and validated and connect in with those positive qualities that then like remind us of our positive qualities within.
Yes. Yeah. And remaining young at heart, right? Because I think that the age thing transcends all of that. It depends on where your heart's at, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for you, do you connect in with the fairies? Is it more of a sense that you have a feeling or something that you hear or see or smell?
It's just, it's more moments when I see the connection of kindness, really, that comes between animals and people or people and people. So just being observant of that and aware of it, or keeping your antenna up is how I call it, right? Just kind of looking for those moments in your day-to-day where magic happens, right?
Yeah, I love that. It's like if you have your magic fairy lens on, and
Yeah, exactly.
the glasses on, and then
So around here it would be my silk goggles, which I did not wear for this. But yeah.
Like if you have your soap goggles on, with your fairy dust, then
yes,
then those experiences, you see them or you witness them, or the beauty out in nature. It's like, oh,
yeah,
so much around us.
Right. And I know there are certain areas where they like to hang out. We have a beautiful silver maple tree that's right outside the house that I'm in right now. And it's just the perfect fairy hangout spot. And then next to that are the pomegranate trees, and they like both of those a lot. So, on the days that they're very active, we know that that's where they're hanging out in between doing their fairy stuff.
And tell us a little bit more. Do you just have that sense that they're hanging out there, or you just feel their little ripple of magic? Or
yeah, it's when the leaves move in the trees. You can tell when the wind blows. It's not always the wind.
Right.
Right? Sometimes it's the fairies.
Yes, that's so beautiful, because it's like remembering that there's so many different realms, and we might not see the fairies like we can the goat right in front of
Right.
us.
Right.
Ooh. But if we
Yeah.
kind of open our mind to the fact that there are other realms,
Yes, there are other realms. There are things that we can't see, but we know they're there, just like the wind.
right? Just like the wind.
You can't see it, but you can feel it.
Mhm. And Jill, you're such a beautiful example of
Oh,
an adult living, on earth and working with the animals and running your own business in a rural town. But it's
mm,
also such a popular business because you guys have the magic draw,
yeah.
the fairy dust,
Yeah.
and being an adult and having the magic on your
Mm,
farm and in you and in your life, because I think we sometimes forget that fairy
mm.
sparkle when we get older.
Yeah, we do. Yes, it reminds me of Peter Pan, right? When Peter Pan wants to bring Tinkerbell back, and you have to clap if you believe in fairies. And it's true, right? You kind of have to, they feed off the belief or the sense that people still um, know that they're there, right?
Yeah, it's like if you believe, trust,
Hmm.
and see what unfolds.
Yeah, it opens up a whole nother realm for you.
Yeah. And for you, what would be for people listening, or adults or children that want a little sprinkle of fairy magic in their life and they don't really know what the first step would be? And
Oh boy.
for children, it might be easier. But do you have any thoughts of like building a little fairy house or something
Oh,
else that just brings
yes,
a little
for
more
bringing that
freedom?
up. I forgot about the fairy houses. Yeah, fairies love fairy houses. So, a fun thing to do would be to create a little fairy garden. And it doesn't have to be big, it can even be something that's in on a plate or a bowl. And you can create soil and some moss and maybe seed a little bit of ground cover. And if you know somebody who's into ceramics, you can put a little bit of a house on there. And they love to congregate around there. And then find a nice shaded or protected area where they can go. And then just wait and see what happens.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah. I mean,
like
we have to
creative.
cultivate that part in our hearts because I think, like you said, the older you get, the more likely it is that that kind of goes to sleep, and you have to actively remember to wake it up. Right.
Yeah,
So do
right.
it.
Do it. And
Yeah.
you might feel a little funny or awkward at first, but
Yeah.
after
Get
5 minutes,
over it.
it's like so fun. It's just playing again.
It is. It's, yes, it's that sense of play. And I think that that's something that we think about when we think about fairies is that they love to play. And so, yes, we know they love to play because I would love it if they would fold soap boxes for me, but that is work and they don't do that. I wish they would.
And and you said that sometimes they're
Uh,
feeling a little mischievous. They
yeah,
also play with the
yeah.
goat.
Oh, yeah, because I don't know if you know, but goats can be mischief makers. They love to figure out how to escape from their pasture. And sometimes, even though we remember that we've clipped the gate with a little hasp, they get out. So the only reason we can think of is that the fairies helped them. And we'll look outside and they're heading for the fruit trees. So we have to run outside and get them back inside before all the fruit trees or the nut trees are stripped of their leaves and no fruit. So the fairies like to help them do things like that sometimes, especially with the baby goats. When the baby goats get a little bit of gumption and like to challenge each other or the adults, we know where that's coming from. They think that they're bigger than they are.
And Jill, you have such a great sense of humor too, and kindness, and that purity and connection of the fairy realms too.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. And it makes me think too, like, what can we do to support the fairy world even more? And I love your idea of the building,
Yeah.
building the little fairy gardens, witnessing the fairies more.
Yes.
Any other thoughts, reflections, or
Get spray glitter and put it everywhere. um, I think just when you practice kindness, I think that invites in the positive energy that fairies love, and that brings them around. So you can spread that. Just think of yourself when you're being kind to others as spreading fairy dust, because in a way, that's what you're doing.
Great. Oh, I
Yeah.
love spreading fairy dust.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's like when you sprinkle that fairy dust on others, then you also receive it as
That's
well.
right. Yes. Yes. As evidenced by when my husband does a bath bomb class in the soap room, and there is literally glitter everywhere. It doesn't matter if you were there or not. It's in the air for hours afterwards. And if you just go in and leave, you're covered with glitter dust, right? So that's kind of the same thing. If you're spreading kindness, you think of kindness as fairy dust, then you're spreading it over other people. And yes, it gets on you too. And it gives something for someone else to then give to somebody else. So it just keeps going. It's like a ripple in the pond.
Right. Yeah. And it's
Right.
like you're remembering your inner kindness, reflecting that, and then reminding other people of their inner kindness sparkle.
Yeah.
And I do hear that little fairy whisper of, and if you need help remembering that fairy dust,
Yeah.
Jill's pixie soap.
Yeah.
It's like you just rub it on, and there is something so special about it because it
Yeah.
has the warm sun of where you live and the goats and the fairy dust, and it is a really special product. So
Well,
I think that's a little fairy
aw,
whisper. You need a little extra just reminder of like, okay,
yes. Just
your own fairy dust.
yes. Aw.
Oh, Jill, well, anything else? Let me see if I have any other pertinent questions. Does anything come to mind? This is so.
I had written things down, and then of course I left them in the soap room. Is there anything else that's I can't think of anything else.
Okay, this feels perfect, and
Good.
just the reminder of talking to the fairies and witnessing them and remembering their magic and seeing them in the wind. Remember they're all around.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So Jill, thank you so much for joining with
Aw.
me and the fairies and for spreading the fairy magic.
Mhm.
You
I
live.
just love spending time with you.
I'm very glad. And keep us posted for anyone that's listening. If you have any fairy stories, share them with us because
Yes.
I feel like we're building a fairy community. And
Yeah.
there is such a strong global fairy community, but it's fun to start
Locally.
remembering it more and locally as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Actually, this is what I wanted to ask a fun
Uh-huh.
thought is if you like, sometimes I like to imagine that I'm one of the fairy secretaries,
Oh,
right? I love to write fairy letters and to children. And so I was thinking for you, if you thought of being a community member with the fairies, do you like imagining yourself as a fairy? I said fairy advisor in the beginning, but it could be one of the fairy farmers or fairy soap makers.
fairy soap maker. Well, fairy soap makers work in conjunction with fairies for sparkle. I mean, so if you find soap that doesn't have sparkle, they need to find some fairies, right?
Right. And kind of fun to ponder too for who's ever listening. It's like, ooh, if you wanted to you are a part of the fairy community, but what would there be a certain, like you wanted to be a fairy house builder, or
Oh yeah. How would you
that's
weave
kind of fun
that
to think about.
that fun into whatever it is that you do? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
fairy artists sharing, or fairy storytellers sharing stories. We can all work together to also be
Yeah.
supporting and serving the fairies and amplifying their magic.
Yeah. I agree. Bringing the sweetness and kindness into more of our day to day, just as people, right?
Yeah.
Because more of that. We need a whole lot more of that.
Yeah. And for you, our parting little thought, would it be for people every day, kind of bringing that fairy magic in? Would it be you kind of watching the wind, imagining the fairies, or just kind of putting on their fairy soap making goggles or glasses,
Well,
having the fairy
I'll tell
magic
you from
lens?
now on, every time I put on my fairy soap making goggles, I'm going to think of that. It'd be like magic glasses that you can see fairies with, right? I mean, the sky's the limit. Use your imagination. And I feel like a lot of people that come up to the farm, and you can tell the ones that really feel a connection with the farm, those are the people that we would connect with on that level, right? The ones who see or feel the magic that's here. Because I just feel like there is a sense of magic here. And we get a lot of people who come up and connect with that. So it's,
Well,
it's
thank you.
in, and yeah, go ahead.
It's like, thank you, because you're creating that really special place for people to connect in with the goats and nature and the fairy realms.
Yes. Yep. That's it. I'm just here to greet them when they show up.
Fairy
Oh,
facilitator.
yeah. Yes. Yeah. Fairy facilitator. There you go. That's the role.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. And we look forward to more fairy conversations.
Oh, good. Thanks, Winslow, for having me.
Thank you. Bye.